I'm Glen Owen. I'm an exercise and health professional, and you're listening to the N=1 Exercise Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another delicious and nutritious episode of the N=1 podcast. My name is Glenn. I am your host, and I am very excited because today I get to be joined by a good friend of mine, owner of a wonderful gym where I am currently working out of, and he's just a great dude. He's tremendously knowledgeable. I can't even look him in the eyes as I say it because he's just so good looking. I could talk about him for hours, but I'd rather let him introduce himself and talk about himself a little bit. Everyone, this is Brandon Green, RTS Mastery, Certified Muscle System Specialist, overall great guy. Brandon, thank you for coming to the podcast today, sir.
Glenn, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I appreciate it a lot.
I am very excited too, man. This I felt like was a long time coming. And when I first decided to do this kind of iteration of the podcast, because I'm on my third iteration of the podcast, I thought I would really like to get to talk to some people who I know in the fitness industry and I respect a lot. And you were like one of the first names that came to my brain. So I'm really glad you said yes to this almost right away. It made me really, really happy and full of joy, brother.
Well, I really appreciate it. I just hope I don't blow your expectations. I hope it's okay and I do an okay job, but I'm super excited about it to be here. I appreciate the offer too a lot.
I think we're gonna have a blast, and I'm just sitting down in a room with you, being able to pick your brain a little bit. I think it's gonna be great for the people. It's gonna be great for me. It's gonna be great for listeners. It's gonna be awesome, and I have no worries about expectations at all, man. We're just here to have a good time and all that jazz. If you don't mind, would you tell the people a little bit about you, a little bit about your story, what makes you tick, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I'll happily expand on that and just see if I can do diligence to my history, I guess,
Sure.
without sounding too weird. So actually this December, I'll be in the fitness industry working, accepting money for my time, I guess, for almost 15 years.
15 years? Has it been that long,
15
huh?
years, yeah, it's crazy. I was just thinking about that. And it just blew my mind. So my story is probably a little bit different, but probably very similar to most. I got into fitness and this industry actually because of my love of drums and music. Mm-hmm. And so my entire high school and early elementary school, I was a drummer. I was a pretty fast drummer. I've got pretty fast hands. So I played in like punk rock, metal, and rock music, which was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. As such, I became a session musician. It was a really, really cool style of experience. I really loved it. But what sucked was when I would go to these rock shows and I was playing in the bands, I was like an opening act. The guy who was closing the whole show, the drummer, would always take his shirt off and he'd look sick, shredded, look all awesome. And I'd show up there with my little pale, half Jewish, half European body with no muscle on it and would not look as good as him. So I got into exercising. I started trying to put some muscle on my body because I felt insecure. I was skinny, didn't look good, but I wanted to take my shirt off when I was playing drums. Mm-hmm. So I got into working out and I fell in love with it because I was one of those Lego mechanical kids. I loved the mechanics, figuring things out. It was never just enough to build the house out of Lego. I always wanted to figure out how many different configurations could I make the house. So I got into exercise and it was really cool because I had this great mentor who was a bit crazy of a dude, but he'd taken this crazy RTS course and he'd studied with a friend of ours and late mentor of mine, Peter Chasen, who was the RTS instructor in Toronto. He had studied with him, was friends with him. And at 17 years old, doing a co-op at a gym, he made me do the CanFit personal training certification on my 18th birthday, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. But he also did this like pseudo biomechanics test with me, which I thought was just a normal process of getting hired to work at a gym. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, but I had to know what like a moment arm was and what a closed pack position was. And he'd taken this whole RTS course and he'd kind of broken it down to the things he thought were most important. I had to know what first class, second class levers were and how to modify them. And it was really cool because what it did for me at a very early age was it really taught me how to not look at exercise in such a linear, pre-choreographed fashion. So when you look at a barbell bench press, it's not just, well, this is the barbell bench press exercise. More that this is a summation of body parts and physics and positions and magnitudes and all this stuff that equates to what we call a barbell bench press. But what's cool is much like Lego, you can break it down and build it up and modify it and change the style of resistance. You can use elastomers, cable machines, and all that kind of stuff. And so I was really invigorated by that. And then that translated to me working with a lot of people struggling with pain. I was 19 and I became the head trainer at this place called Persicini Fitness in Newmarket, which was awesome, doing study groups like I do here. But as such, because I'd studied some of these joint force biomechanical things, I was getting people with issues.
Yeah.
And so where I am now and where you are now with me is that I spent the last 13 years trying to figure out, how do you use exercise to help folks who are struggling with issues and at the end of the day just want to move better. Same journey that you're on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other parts of the story, but that's kind of like the meat and potatoes of where I came from and why I do this stuff now. I want people to have the best life they possibly can. I don't care if they love drums, playing hockey, playing with their grandkids. I just want people to be strong, and skeletal muscle and exercise is a brilliant, logical way of doing that.
Did you, so first, thank you for sharing. And like, that's already opened up a ton of questions I have. Did you, when you were first starting on your path, did you think you were going to do the whole aesthetic route, help people get like jacked and lean, or was it always going to be helping people move better and enjoy quality of life?
No, great question. Honestly, probably like I would bet most of us that get into this industry, it was about looking good. I thought how I can pick up some weight and I can change the shape of my body. So at the very beginning, I was passionate about being jacked. I got into bodybuilding, powerlifting. I loved picking up heavy weights and growing muscle. And that's what I wanted other people to do. It was really a passion of composition at the very beginning. And then realizing the power of it when I would get a client, like my first client that I had that had a big issue was a lady that still comes here now. She's been a client of mine for 13 years. She sees Taylor twice a week and then sees me for a check-in once in a while. Excruciating, kept playing all this crazy stuff, and I tried to do all the things I was told that were supposed to help her. The physio exercises, the stretches, the rolling and all that stuff. And Glen, honestly, after some time doing some assessments, learning about how her body performs and contracts, we started creating exercises for her, and she got stronger and better. And coincidentally, the pain sensation started to go away. And when I started seeing that people could do something they haven't done for over a decade or more just by exercising differently, that was invigorating.
Yeah. And so when do you think that shift happened? Because you said at 19, you were the head trainer at a place called Persicini's. When did you start seeing that like shift in your mindset? Was there like an aha moment, or was it like a little bit more of a gradual transition?
Oh, that client, who I almost named her, but that comes here, that was a big aha moment. It was probably around 19 or 20, to be honest.
Yeah.
Peter, who taught in the RTS classes, I mean, much like many of people that did you ever meet Peter?
I never did, no. I think he passed a year or two before I fell into the education.
So there were many of us that had studied underneath him, and he always had these incredible stories of helping people with crazy issues with exercise and stimulating their muscles, and hearing those stories and finding out that there's a potential viable career option of helping people with exercise. That's, probably was the big pivotal shift, that I can make a career of using Lego, so to speak, to help people move better and feel better. Again,
so many questions kind of unfurl there. One of the reasons I wanted to speak to you today, and I had mentioned that in the email and whatnot, and when we talked beforehand, was I kind of want to get your thoughts on where the fitness industry is at and kind of what direction you see it's going, and maybe where the gaps are right now and a lot of the knowledge that may be there or may not be there. And so, where this kind of leads me to is kind of a jump off. As you said, you were the head trainer at 19, and I've been to a number of different gyms I've worked at this point, and I know a number of different trainers at different gyms, and rarely is the head trainer ever under the age of, let's say, 30, right? We may even say 25, but certainly not 19. Does that say something about the state of the fitness industry, that you're coming in there at the age of 19 and you understand things like levers and moment arms and, some of these like physics terms and like geometry terms, and you know how to apply them to the human body? Does that say something of the state of the union here, or do you think you were just in a unique situation?
That's a great question. I don't know if I could answer that well to say is that a state that I got that position when I was young. But to your larger question, the state of the fitness industry, to be honest, I don't know how you would think about this and how the listeners will think. But honestly, in my opinion, the state of the fitness industry is not great. It's really a confusing time for people to get healthier with exercise. So you have this insane influx of group exercise popularity, right? Budget fitness. You can go to a group exercise place for $150 to $250 and see a personal trainer, air quotes, 3 to 5 times a week. and it's totally not customized to any individual, right? It's fast food fitness.
Oh,
right?
So there's a soundbite, ladies and
Fast
gentlemen.
food fitness. Then you have the other side of the equation where you have all these people who are, sexy, good looking, fit, strong folks. They're taking Instagram pictures of themselves looking great and calling themselves online coaches and personal trainers and entrepreneurs. And they don't know anything about exercise, but because they're huge and look how other people want to look, are starting to influence the fitness industry in a big, big way. Professional bodybuilders who use illegal substances to look huge have massive influence over the types of exercises that people do, which is can be good, but also a terrible thing. And then on the other side of the coin, you have some people that are aware, kind of like we are, that the science is really important. You need to know about physiology and physics, but there are folks that know just a little bit of it and are calling themselves masters in it and are starting to prescribe exercise. And it is a confusing time because, and you know this from our conversation, skeletal muscle is one of the most incredibly powerful things in the body. As far as organs go, you've got so much of it. It can do so much for all the other organs and systems in the body. The stronger you are, a lot of issues go away. The stronger you are, the better prepared you are for other things. So honestly, Glenn, I don't think that the fitness industry right now is really going a great direction to help people focus on improving skeletal muscle. It's going a great direction to be a business owner. If you're a fitness person, you're doing one of these other things because you can make a lot of money off of a lot of people, helping nobody with a high churn rate. But it's not super, super excellent. And then, you've heard me say this. Exercise, yoga, Pilates, running, whatever you want to call it, bodybuilding, CrossFit, these things all don't exist, right? Exercise doesn't exist. Exercise is just a pile of physics and a series of physiological positions and reactions. And you take away clothing and positions and all that stuff. Yoga is just a series of isometric and slightly dynamic positions for periods of time. Resistance exercise is just less time and more resistance, blah, 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 blah. No one's thinking about that. Everyone's just talking about their favorite flavor of ice cream.
Yeah. Could you, let's suppose someone who is never exercised a day in their life, they're maybe not familiar with what eccentric is or concentric is or isometric is. And, you just kind of relate to people. It's like, listen, at least for what I'm hearing is any type of physical movement you do, however you want to brand it, right? Pilates, resistance training, whatever. It's just a compilation and amalgamation of physics and anatomy and physiology, right? For someone who's never exercised before, how do you explain to them what the difference between all this stuff is? If you had to make it in the raw, simplest form, right? Do you think you could do that? Give that a shot for us?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I would say that if I'm talking to anybody about this whole thing, that it really comes down to who the person is and why I'm meeting them. But if it was a family member and I was talking about this whole idea, I would say, think about the body being just like a car. You can drive the car in all these different scenarios, on mud, in the water, on a track, on a highway, on a street. But at the end of the day, the only difference is how fast you're driving the car and visibility and terrain and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So as far as the body goes, we've got joints and muscles.
Right.
And all you need to do to get started is figure out, first of all, why are you exercising? But figure out what positions you can go to, which is very easy. Hey, can you pick your leg up and come back down? You can't go any higher than that. Don't go any further than that. Active range of motion. And then do that same thing a couple times over and then try to see if it can get a little bit better. Right? And simple example that is super, super practical is sitting up and down in a chair. Right? Hey, I want to get stronger, Brandon. Glenn, what should we do? Well, can you sit in that chair? Yeah, great. Can you do that 12 times now? Yeah. Oh, my legs are a little tired. Great. Don't do that again.
Yeah.
2 days from now, try and do 13.
Yeah.
2 days from now, try and do 14. And I think that's the greatest place to start is, don't make it about fancy, crazy bands. That's the other part of it is people are overcomplicating their flavor of fitness and it's intimidating to folks, right? People think that if you're not already in shape. I had a buddy of mine who had a big family event. A bad event. He gained a bunch of body weight. He wasn't happy about himself. And he was someone who was a really in shape dude before.
Yeah.
And so I ran into him and he goes, man, I got to get back to the gym. I'm like, great, man, we'll come. We can work out together. He goes, oh no, I got to get in shape before I go to the gym. I'm like, what? That makes totally no sense at all. So anyway, I kind of diverted from your question. At the end of the day, I would just try to talk to them that it comes down to their muscles.
Yeah.
And as long as they do what their muscles do, which is really contract, absorb force, and try to stay the same in the position, stay in the same position, and you do that a little bit more each day, it'll get better.
And so did you choose the standing up and sitting down example for any particular reason? So why that versus like a leg press or a leg extension or a leg curl machine or a split squat or something like that?
Well, I thought of that specific example specifically because I was trying to think of someone who does nothing, right? Someone who just walks in the door of the leg. Hey, I heard you do some crazy stuff. What do you do? And I chose that, frankly, because that's the thing that people do every day. Most people sit down on the toilet at least once a day.
Yeah.
If you're someone who stands, and other people sit a lot more. So it's a very familiar motion, very familiar pattern, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely that someone's going to have, I shouldn't say that, but if someone's a healthy individual with no joint problems, they probably can do it a couple times over.
Yeah.
But does it mean it's the best starting place? No. Absolutely not.
So Brandon, you said before, you're working with people and they get stronger, and you find that like if you're able to marry your knowledge of the human body and physiology and anatomy and physics, and you're able to marry that to someone's own unique amalgamation of those things in their own unique person, their own unique body, you said you notice that some of their like negative sensations, some of their pain and discomfort goes down, and they start feeling a little bit better. Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. No, I mean, it's a really complicated topic. I mean, this pain science, nociceptive study, I barely know anything about. I wouldn't even pretend to be an expert of it. However, pain comes from a lot of different places, right? Pain is a sensation. We call it nociception. And there's a challenge because a lot of people that walk in the door might just be feeling something in their body that they don't like. And it may not necessarily be pain. It just may be that they've been educated to perceive this sensation as pain, right? For some people, the very act of just feeling a muscle contract is exhaustingly painful. Oh, it's tight. I can't do that. And that's an interesting conversation, right? If someone just feels a little sensation in their knee, maybe because they've walked a lot more than they had the day before, and it's a little different in there than it was the day before, right? They got knee arthritis.
Okay, I gotcha.
Right? And so that's one part of the equation. And then the other side of it is there are people who are really struggling with pain. They have osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, all the itises, fibromyalgias, whatever you want to call it. And I think, honestly, Glenn, there's kind of two parts. One for sure is that for some people, if you get them stronger in the places that they're not feeling discomfort, it feels good to go there. That gives the body some really, really great options to support to use other joint systems as support. Right? If I've got, my hip, my knee, and my foot, and my knee's killing, if I get my foot and my hip better at managing forces, physics, the world, my knee's not going to have to take as much, which very well may allow it to recover and feel a bit better. The other side of the equation is that, honestly, if someone's experienced a ton, I mean, this is getting a little complicated, but there was this great thing that a guy named Tim Imbriaco sent me, which I think you may have seen him online. He's a brilliant guy. And he was talking about how single-celled organisms learn behaviors. And there was a modular receptor, it was a 3-cell scenario. There was a modular receptor, serotonin, a motor receptor, and then a sensory receptor.
Okay.
And so this little fish-like system had this reaction that when you touched it, its tail would retract into the body as a reaction, just like when someone hits your knee and you would kick forward. And so what they did was they took this little creature and they added an electrical stimulus into the water. And they were trying to show that the electrical stimulus did not create a motor reaction. But when you kinesthetically touch the tail would retract. And that was a byproduct of the sensory receptors recognizing it and then creating that motor reaction. At least that's my understanding of it. So what they started to do was they started touching the tail and electrocuting the water at the same time.
Okay.
So the tail would retract and the water would get electrocuted. The tail would retract and the water would get electrocuted. And then they took the touching away and they'd electrocute the water. And guess what happened?
Tail retracted.
Tail started to retract. So the body started to learn that these two things were connected, right? So let's take a human as an example. If someone really, really hurts their knee and then they go for a big run and they use all these muscles and they contract and they run downhill a bunch and they're kind of feeling their knee a little bit, but through this process of a run, and this is just my hypothesis, they contract all these muscles and they feel the knee sensations at the same time, and the body starts to build a bit of a relationship with all these things. Then the next time they use that series of muscles, like say going up and down the stairs, and they contract their quadriceps, their tibialis anterior, gastroc, and blah, 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 the knee pain comes back. Because they spent 30 minutes running 5K, teaching their body that those are all connected.
Yeah.
So pain is weird, man, because I don't fully understand it, but I have seen that for some people, that they start build relationships with this pain and other things. And it becomes almost like what I call, from a very analogous sense, the pain, program, the pain of the pain program.
I
right?
got you.
Yeah, how people feel pain. And it just becomes like a program, like they learn anything else.
It sounds very like Pavlovian, like Pavlov's dog in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
Kind of.
They bring they teach the dog that when the bell rings, he's going to get food, and they do that often enough. When the bell rings, the dog starts to salivate. Except in this case, it's whenever someone decides they're going to go for a run, they start getting knee pain. Maybe that's like a watered down analogy, but that's kind of what I heard. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, and it's exactly the same thing. The behavioral science and the way that things learn, for sure.
Yeah, pain is an interesting thing because I feel like it's the thing that we all don't want to be there, but it lets us know that something's going on that we kind of need to deal with, or at least be aware of. And it sounds like almost like in this case, you can almost trick your body into thinking that there's something wrong when there isn't. Is that fair? Do you think does that fit into your hypothesis?
That fits into my hypothesis from my opinion and very limited understanding. Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah. And if you had to like stereotype your typical clientele, and I know everyone's different. I mean, that's why it's custom fit exercise, right? That's why this is N=1 podcast. But if you had to like kind of stereotype your clientele a little bit, what kind of people end up coming to see you most?
Generally speaking, I would definitely say that I'm working with people who are over the age of 50, and the age between ages of 50 and 80, sometimes older, sometimes a little less. But ultimately, my specialty is helping people get stronger who are struggling with issues and things they don't like in their body. People who have the most advanced arthritises, the sensations they don't like. They've tried everything, physio, chiro, massage, other personal trainers, and they end up coming to see me.
Yeah. So this is a very broad question. I'm not asking you to point fingers, but why do you think some other modalities don't necessarily work?
That's a great question. I was just talking to my wife about this the other night. I'll be honest, first and foremost, I'm always really anxious about talking about this objectively because I don't want in my objective knowledge base, because I never want to sound like I'm slandering any other thing. But very in short and concisely, which I'm happy to be expansive, most other things, whether it be personal training procedures, including things I've been involved with, therapy, even medical intervention as it relates to people struggling with joint and muscle problems, it has nothing to do with teaching and educating the body of new options. It's all passive external stimulus. I'm going to give you this medicine. See, this medicine makes that thing you like, you don't like, go away. I'm going to take my finger. I'm going to jam my finger into this thing of yours that hurts. I'm going to call it something special, and we're going to make it go away. I'm going to jam my finger into somewhere else and turn something on. We're going to make it go away. And a lot of these things have incredible science behind it showing that it helps with pain relieving analgesic style effects, but it's this dependency thing where the body becomes, if someone wants to feel that, they have to go see that person. If someone wants to feel X, they have to take this medicine. And so I'm kind of digressing from your original question, but most people see people like you and I and other people in our world, in my opinion, because it's really about not only quote unquote trying to solve a problem, even though I hate saying that, but it really comes down to, can you create exercise solutions that teach the body long-term options? And currently, I don't think there's too many things out there that are 100% pro body.
So like the way I'm hearing it in my head is that these passive modalities don't give the body any other options to move through or move past whatever it is experiencing.
It seems to be like that, yeah. And so, I don't want to pick on any one thing. What's something crazy?
You don't have to, but I'm
you know
just
what
curious.
You know what I think of is, you watch The Simpsons?
I'm familiar. Early episodes, not so much. We're like season 31 now, which is bananas, but
yeah, no, I'm not a huge...
Nothing recent.
You're right. It's crazy, actually. Simpsons are nuts. But there was one episode. Did you ever see the episode where Homer Simpson had a back problem and he fell over a garbage can?
That's right. Yeah. Then the team of chiropractors coming to ruin his garbage can back chiropractor. Sorry, I'm ruining it. Go on, you tell the story.
No. So this is it, right? So Homer Simpson had this back problem. He's in his garage trying to do something and he falls. And he falls over this garbage can, throws his back into this crazy amount of extension. You hear this crack, and he gets up, He's healed, right? And so this is what happens, and this is, Palmer and all these other guys who've created other therapies and things like that. I mean, they stumbled across something that made a difference.
Yeah.
And so Homer did that. And so what does he do like most people do that find something that helps themselves or one other person? Mm-hmm. They tell everyone it will help them.
Yes.
And so the problem is that every time someone hurts their back in that scenario, they got to go back and get their back cracked over top of that garbage can. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I like to think of it. So because I mentioned I was a musician, I always think back to music, because music is one of those things where, motor learning processes, you have to take step 1, a cognitive step, step 2, associative step, and then step 3, an autonomous step, right? Mm-hmm. The 3 phases of motor learning. If you want to learn something new, you have to internalize it. You got to figure out how it fits into your head. How do you learn things? And then second, you have to, efficiently learn something. You have to associate it to something. Because if you don't associate it to something, to a movement, a skill, a smell, a sound, or whatever it is, your body will forget it. And then over time, that association becomes autonomous. Mm-hmm. And that's where we have automatic things that we just do, kind of like talking and walking and all that kind of stuff. So if someone has a problem, and say someone can figure out exactly where the issue is, therapy, trainer, doctor, whatever it may be, actually orthotics are a great example of that. Right? Mm-hmm. Someone has a foot problem, they get a pair of orthotics. Orthotics are a passive support system to try and hold the foot up in a relative position to help manage excessive amount of pronation or supination. And I was just talking to somebody about this today. No one ever says, great, thank you for my orthotics. Mm-hmm. What's my exit plan? Mm-hmm. How do I get out of these orthotics?
Right.
And the answer is, well, you don't. You just stay in them.
Orthotics for life, baby.
So, I mean, orthotics, yeah, exactly. And orthotics are just like a cast, right? If you put an elbow cast on because you broke your arm, and then after your arm heals, the doctor goes, nah, you know what? Just keep that cast on. It'll protect you from breaking your elbow down the road. Mm-hmm. I mean, that arm's going to shrink up. Your bone density is going to get crazy. Your skin's going to get all itchy and rashed up, and it's crazy. That's under the bottom of the feet, is you completely lose the strength in the mid-step of your foot, the arch, if you will, and it becomes a long-term problem. Mm-hmm. And then you see 70-year-olds now who've had arch support for 25 years. Mm-hmm. Who can't walk barefoot in their house. That's bananas.
That is bananas. Do you have anyone like that?
I have a lot of people like that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had never considered that.
It's crazy. And I mean, and that's the whole thing, is regardless of, they stopped using their body. Mm-hmm. They stopped contracting that area. They stopped exposing the sensory receptors to the ground, the hard surface, mm-hmm. and they became more so dependent on this artificial support, this orthotic, if you want to use it in this case, or high support shoe or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about their body, which comes back to the same thing with exercise. It comes down to the individual body, the physiology, mm-hmm. and the physics that go through it, mm-hmm. and the tolerance to it.
So it's interesting because when we started this conversation, we're talking for nearly 30 minutes now. We've kind of gone a bit of a path here, right? So you talked a little bit about how you got in the fitness industry, about being this trainer for Ciccinis, but also your introduction to, but also proclivity to from childhood, like mechanics and how do things fit together and logic and talking about levers and anatomy and physiology. And then we went through this whole route of talking about things like, well, why passive modalities might not work so well versus active modalities, and why, people who are roided up and look really, really lean and jacked on Instagram have a lot more influence than maybe people who don't look as great but are speaking with more logic and evidence. So we've gone through this a bit of a roller coaster here. And so what this kind of takes me to is I guess kind of two things. One is, is there a separation in your mind between aesthetics and function in the human body? Actually, let's start there because I could go on. But so it sounds like it's yes, but I'd rather leave that up to you. Do we need more of a separation between aesthetics and function in the world of health and fitness? Or are they kind of two of the same in your mind?
Well, you kind of asked two things. Is there a separation of the two, and do we need to have a separation between the two?
Yeah.
I think 100% there is a separation between the two.
Okay.
There are some tremendously awful-looking people that are incredibly, remarkably healthy, strong, and can do some awesome stuff.
Right.
But just because of their genes, their family history, whatever it may be, they have more body fat than somebody else, or they don't. They're, as a male, instead of having an X frame, their shoulders are a little narrower than their hips. I don't think that someone needs to look good to be healthy. Mm-hmm. But there is a strong correlation with people who have less body fat and more skeletal muscle, generally speaking, to be healthier. Mm-hmm. So, I think that would be great because, I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, you can go kind of two directions with that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I don't even know.
I think as far as it goes for a thought experiment, I think it's important to ask that question to people who are interested in exercise and fitness to get an idea of what's going on. Because I think that my sentiments will probably mirror yours, which is, when I get people that come in and see me, and like I have a couple of people that would like to lose some weight and look better naked. Like that's a very real goal of some of the people that I work with. But we have to have a real conversation about like trade-offs, I guess is what it comes down to, right? Like there's a certain amount of work and effort and maybe strain to put on your muscles sometimes that would border over on what might necessarily be healthy, right? And so that's where the conversation starts being like, how important are these goals to you, and what do you really, really want? There's a certain line that I'm not willing to cross to put people through if they want to get bigger and stronger. I don't really want to make people more hurt or beat them up if they don't feel good. Like I kind of want to dial it back a little bit. But you ask any pro bodybuilder out there, or someone who's been in the physique game long enough, regardless, I guess, of if they compete or not. But they usually got some stuff going on that they usually tend to ignore because no pain, no gain, got to push the workout X, Y, Z. So I think it's at least worth a conversation to explain to people like, and this is like an RTS concept. The RTS stands for Resistance Training Specialist, if we haven't said that already. But that there's like an internal performance, which is how's everything inside the skin doing. And there's an external performance, which is like how are we measuring what we're doing on the outside here. And oftentimes, if you're only worried about what's going on the outside, that external performance thing, often you're devoid or not thinking about how well things are functioning underneath the skin. So that's at least where I start.
And that's perfect. And you know what's funny? And then that brings up a great conversation, which I didn't even think to go down, but I talk about with a lot of clients. I mean, the process of being fit, the process of losing weight to have an abdominal six-pack, the process of putting on muscle, the process of picking up an amount of weight that is impressively heavier than anyone else can pick up. I mean, that's it's an incredible process that the body can go through. But I mean, you're traumatizing the body, right? Yeah. You're starving your body of calories or burning so many calories, so to speak, that your body manages the body fat adipose tissue and gets rid of it and uses it as energy. You stress the skeletal so much, that skeletal muscle, that it has to grow and change size. Right? You yank so much weight that the body goes, dang, if we're going to do that again, we need to get better at moving this thing or we're going to hurt ourselves. And that's not always, I mean, it's a pretty remarkable process and can be very healthy, but it can also be very traumatic to the joints and the bones. I mean, that's a great point you bring up.
I can see why you would say it's like a very complicated thing to dive into. And so this kind of now really does bring us back to full circle, which is what are some of the things that you think fitness professionals in the industry, and we'll say personal trainers to be specific, don't know or are ignoring, paying attention to, that is at the, I'm not sure it's the right word, behest of their clients, that's not serving their clients, or is not serving them in general?
That's a great question. There are two things that come to mind immediately, and I'll probably think of a couple others. I mean, one in the vein of this entire conversation so far, most personal trainers don't know anything about skeletal muscle. And I hate to say that. They know that if you strain it, it'll get bigger, and that certain exercises focus on certain body parts, but they don't really understand how muscle contracts. They don't understand. Most people, I mean, when I ask every client this, most people think muscles are elastic-like. Every person. And I always ask all my clients, do you think of skeletal muscle being more like elastic or more like a rope? And 99.9% of people say, oh, elastic for sure, right? The properties of skeletal muscle are nothing like elastic bands. They are much more rope-like. That in itself, that one piece of information should completely revolutionize the process of how you go about conducting an exercise session with someone. The other, I would say, I mean, I could go down a whole physics route, would be the number one thing as far as physics go, would be being aware of what the heck inertia is and being able to manage the forces and changes of directions when people do exercises, including the weight of someone's limb. And I really think lately I've been focusing a lot more on the weight of a limb, like someone's arm weight, and where it is orientation in space that makes a big difference. But that's a whole other fun, nerdy tangent. I think, if people understand what acceleration is, and how inertia, right, this property associated with mass affects everything on this planet. And when you do an exercise and you do a bicep curl and you go from one position to up and then you change directions, you actually have to stop that weight from accelerating the other way. And the faster you're doing that, the more forces there's going to be when you change directions. I mean, ultimately, Glenn, that's where a lot of people are hurting themselves with exercise, is because you have a lot of these group exercise things, which burpees, right? Burpees are popular, clean and jerks right now, kipping pull-ups, all these things where there's massive acceleration and jumping and changing in directions. Those are all fine movements, but those abrupt changes in directions and impact, it's really damaging. I mean, I think I heard something about, like, if you do a jump squat and you land on your feet at a 100-degree knee flex position, there's like 10 times your body weight of joint force from the femur to the tibia, right? If you're a 200-pound person like I am, like, that's a lot of freaking weight going through your knee. No wonder people are blowing knees.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I mean, learn more about muscle, actually. And then second, learn about properties of mass and properties of resistance. And there's so much more. I mean, I really don't think people know anything about what motor learning is, which in itself, those three principles, the cognitive to associative to autonomous phases, could really modify one trainer's approach to exercising. Trainers right now are too fixated on doing the stuff that they like with their clients.
Okay.
I'm a football trainer, Glenn. I'm a football coach. Coach is our big popular word right now. We're going to do football style training with you. We're going to do running burpees and all that kind of stuff. And it's just not right.
Yeah. Would you say the same statements? You'd make the same statements for general public exercising as well? Do you want to rephrase that?
Yeah, if you don't mind. How do you mean that?
Well, we had just talked. I just asked, what are some things that you wish trainers knew that maybe they didn't or they're not paying attention to? And you talked about like mass, inertia, and how these forces play out during very fast or explosive movements, and how you like people to slow it down. Maybe. Well, that's what I'm saying. I heard that as like maybe people learn how to slow it down and control things a little bit more and all that kind of stuff. And it sounded, and it could sound, at least to people listening, very scientific. What kind of maybe advice do you have for the general public who's going to the gym, maybe not interested in a trainer, but are listening to this podcast being like, I just like to go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week and I want to maybe improve that. Would you suggest still learning about inertia and mass and all that jazz, or would you give them something different to think about?
So I would give them a piece of advice that focuses on both of those things with a third piece of advice, but I would probably never tell them about skeletal muscle mechanics or inertia because my mom and dad don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
I would say 3 things. 1, when you go to the gym to do an exercise, if you're doing a leg extension or a chest press, try to feel the muscles that are involved with that movement, right? A lot of people just go in. I just did an Instagram story on this for our business. People just go in, they start doing the movement for their biceps or their chest, and then they don't worry about how it feels until the very end of the exercise where they start to get the burn and they go, I got it. Try to feel those muscles from the very first rep. That changes the entire experience. Second, when you're doing an exercise, right, there's a stopping point, a pushing point, a stopping point, and then a changing direction and stopping, right? 4 steps, 4-step rep, 6-step, depending how you look at it. When you change directions, stop. Have a concrete end and completely stop. That in itself, that takes care of the whole inertial thing I talked about. They don't need to know what inertia is. They just need to know if you stop at the ends and you get full control of the exercise, there's a very low likelihood that you're going to hurt yourself if you're going a controlled tempo. And then the third, and the one that I think is the most important, actually I can't say that, but it's very important, is stay within your active range of motion. All I would tell them is, hey, when you go into an exercise machine with your arm, try to recreate the exercise motion without actually grabbing the machine and see, can your body even do that? Do you have the motion ability to get into that machine's position? If you don't, modify it. And if you do, have at her.
Yeah.
But you got to stay within your own position. You got to stay within your joint range of motions. You got to stay within what your body has. I think that's the simplest one. If your body can't go there without your own skeletal muscles going there, why the heck would you go any further?
No, that's a very good point, and I really appreciate that you delineated between like the practical advice and like here's the thing that trainers and other fitness industry professionals should be looking at or knowing if they're going to be working with human bodies. Where would you like to see the fitness industry go in the next 5 years? What would you like to see happen?
I have a really facetious answer.
I would love to hear your facetious answer.
I can't say that out loud, actually. Never mind.
Okay.
No,
Stricken from
you know
the
what
record.
I was going to say is, so Arthur Jones, who's a guy who developed Nautilus, someone asked him what would be the number one thing you could do in the fitness industry. He said, I'd take every coach who makes people do barbell back squats as their only exercise and put them on an airplane and throw them into the side of a mountain.
Okay.
It's terrible.
Arthur Jones said it, everybody.
Arthur Jones is completely crazy. You know,
he is. Did he have like a primate? Did he own like his own like set of apes or something like that?
He was he had his whole own zoo.
Yeah.
And on top of developing Nautilus exercise equipment, he was working on trying to do oh my gosh, you guys can find this online. I think it's hilarious. But he was working on trying to create the world's most poisonous snake.
Okay.
So he's breeding all these different forms of poisonous snakes together to try and get the world's most poisonous. He was just a crazy, eccentric guy.
Crazy old man.
So to your advice, boy, I don't even know how to answer this question well. I would like for people just to learn more about their body.
Okay.
And try to get more objective information. Because I think nowadays the consumer is really, like the client consumer, is really inundated with insane marketing. There's so much marketing, 6-pack ab in 12 weeks. Or the challenge is a really popular thing that fitness places are doing right now to try and incentivize people to come in and spend money at their place. Sexy people are all over Instagram and people want to click on that. They want to look like them. Medical people just want to give you medicine right now. Mm-hmm. I really think that if you learn more about health, physics, sleep, right? Cognitive health, body health, sleep health, nutritional health, all that stuff. And you do the best you possibly can as a fitness person to be just a healthy individual, right? Then you've really done the best you can to prepare for whatever's going to come in your world.
Right.
Prohabilitation is something we talk about in the exercise professional education program, the whole muscle specialist world. And it's really preparing your body for when something not great's going to happen. And it's a super negative way of looking at it, but the stronger you can get your body now, the better prepared you're going to be for an event that comes down the road. So I would really love it if the fitness industry became more aware about what's going on inside the body.
Yeah.
What the heck muscles do. And gosh darn it, if I were being super, super selfish, is get away from all these super jumping circus-like exercises. Clean and jerks are cool. They're a lot of fun. I did them a lot. I know you did too. But not everybody should be doing them.
No.
You shouldn't be racing for fitness. Fitness is about you. It's not a sport.
I like it, Brendan. Listen, I think this is probably a pretty good place to start wrapping it up at here. Do you have any final words of wisdom you'd like to give to anybody out there listening?
Words of wisdom. Jeepers. This is a cliche quote from our world, but Edward de Bono, and I got tattooed on my arm. It is historical continuity that maintains most assumptions, not a repeated assessment of their validity. So if you're an exercise person, a fitness professional in this world, I would say rethink everything. Always be looking at the exercises, the things you're doing, the people you're seeing, and constantly ask yourself, am I doing the best that I can? I think people should be doing that with everything. Second, get really creative with the stuff you got. I think creativity, Einstein said it really well. Creativity is a super underutilized skill set or practice. And the more creative somebody can get in art, the more creative you can get within your world of academia and application. And then third, if this is a consumer, someone who's a client who's not a trainer, take care of yourself. The stronger you are, the better you'll feel. The stronger you are, the more you're going to get out of your body and the more you'll get out of your life. And don't be afraid of working with somebody who can kind of guide you as a body consultant to give you some direction. But Glenn, honestly, I don't know where this goes from here, but dude, I really appreciate your time. I love hanging out with you, man. So I'm super humbled to be on this podcast, and thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, I'm super happy you said yes to this. I hope in the future you'll do some more, because I feel like we touched on a whole bunch of different topics today, and I feel like we just really scratched the surface of most of them. I think we could really get in depth with some stuff here. Brendan, where can people find you? Sorry about that, everybody.
So everyone, you can find me in a couple different places. On my website or Instagram is stratainternalperformance.com, or at Instagram. I also have a musician drum-based business at Drum Mechanics. And yeah, you guys can find me online. If you look up Brandon Green Strata, I hate to say it, but you'll find me pretty quick.
Yeah, and the facility here is located at?
So we're at Newmarket, 17705 Leslie Street. We're near Davis Drive and Leslie. Almost forgot there. Whoops. Davis Drive and Leslie off the 404. So we're in Newmarket. So anybody who wants to come by and check out the place, see me or Glenn, come by anytime. We'd love to see you.
Yeah, it would be really, really cool. Brandon, thanks again for doing this. All right.
Cheers.
All right, buddy.